Welcome to Designing for Humans in the Loop podcast, where we discuss the intersection of AI and design. I'm Justin, and alongside me is Taryn. We're curious about the intersection of design, the evolving landscape of AI, how AI is reshaping design and transforming our professional landscape. Today, we have Riley joining us to discuss building AI-ready organisations and why people matter more than technology. Riley is an AI literacy strategist and founder of AI Flywheel, helping organisations shift from how can AI solve this to how do we build an organisation ready for AI? With deep experience in enterprise transformation, Riley's focused on solving what most AI programs get wrong. They teach technology without transforming how people actually think and work. So much to take from this conversation, so let's dive in.
Welcome, Riley, to Designing for Humans in the Loop. We're so happy to have you here today. I know we've been talking for a while about how we can have you on the podcast, and the stars didn't align, so we're just happy that we were able to actually make this work. And I'm going to hand over to Justin to lead with this first question that we have for you. And I know that it's something that's on our minds. It's something that's on the minds of many leaders and exec leaders and organizations. So really like to unpack this one with you.
Yeah, welcome Riley, and thanks for making the time. Yeah, I happened to go to an event this week around AI, and this sort of sprung in our mind with what we'd had discussed earlier. And it's a quote from Michael Spranger. He's a president from Sony. Let me just read this out, and then maybe let's sort of take it from there and unpack that. I think is that it will increasingly be important to create an AI-ready organization rather than can AI solve this problem. How can you set up the organization so you can make use of AI? Formulate business problems so that AI can help. What data you collect, how you create value in a way that the machine learning can solve that for you. And I really like this because I know you've written an article around this, around your framework, and we'll get into that in a minute. But what does that mean for you? Is that really what AI literacy could be in terms of how we build this into organisations, or do organisations need to change?
Yeah, I think it's very on point, actually. I think that's actually why some of the companies that are springing up now that are really being built from a sort of an AI native perspective have an absolute advantage by far and away, because they don't have to unstitch a lot of legacy things that have been built for another era, operating at a different pace. Not thinking about how things are plumbed together and how you can leverage data if you mix them together, like really not set up for that sort of intent, right? And if you are sort of getting into that space, you are literally having to unpick old establishment, kind of things in order to get there, right? And so you're really fighting against two streams, inertia and, trying to get, traction at the same time in different directions, right? And so I think for that reason, that is definitely on point. And I think that the companies that really will succeed over the next couple of years will actually be those ones who actually are the ones who are able to adapt to that new way of working, and not just as human level, but as an organization. And then so there's probably three parts of it that I agree with. So that overall is kind of my sort of thinking is, yeah, that's definitely in alignment for sure. The second one is interesting that they said was, when you start to think about business problems, you also think about the data that's going to help you to help. Essentially, it's like, Jerry Maguire, help me, help you. Like, what is the data that AI is going to need in order for us to actually solve this together, or it'll get AI to solve it for us? And that mentality that really is around that sort of really decoupling how you get things done now and how you will get them done in the future, to get new problems solved, new types of ways of working, but also new capabilities and capacity is really unlocked at that point, because you're not because you're thinking differently, right? You're really, really looking at problems and solving problems in a different way. And I think that's really interesting in that quote. And then the last one is really around, we will have to see very different business models, different organizational structures. At the moment, we're very siloed. And the thing about this is that it was built for efficiency, and having focus, right? The problem is that AI is brilliant at contributing its knowledge and its capability based on data. Now, one of the things that I think is really underthought about at the moment in business and also just people's use of AI is obviously it's actually constrained to what the AI has data on. But it's not just about what the large language model is, or not just about, Salesforce having data within within that one system, but it's actually about where what other data is either locked in people's brains. We all know that there's a lot of things that are, part of the corporate intelligence that
Mm.
really are unwritten down. And the second one is that what corporate intelligence is actually in systems that aren't connected to that AI, right? And because it's in silos. And so if we
Mm.
are going to actually think about operating in a different way and really getting the most power out of all of our corporate abilities, intent, in information, we
Mm.
have to start thinking horizontally and how do we actually make it built for both humans to maybe it's more of a matrix where you've got like big swaths of like connections that actually bring together like all of that information that all of the systems can leverage off, and then the humans and how they sort of do that. But that siloed intent is going to limit and potentially, bias in not a great way AI's capability within, discrete areas if it doesn't have access to both of those sorts of data and intent, which we're not currently set up for. So both of those things I think are true.
Yeah, it's almost like it's a big reset, almost, isn't it?
Yeah, like it genuinely is. When they say new paradigm, I think you kind of go, yeah, well, that is something that is hard to put your finger on.
Mm.
But yeah, genuinely, like it's a real complete reset of what is possible, and I think that that's why it's being likened more to the Industrial Revolution rather than the iPhone.
Yeah, yeah,
And so yeah, it's much bigger than that because it's actually the entire mechanics of how society is constructed. And yeah, it's much bigger from that perspective. So I think that there's necessary, and the only problem is like obviously the Industrial Revolution created new operations, created new ways of structuring, even put together things like our education system has literally been built so that we actually make better workers for the industrial era, right? Like it's
yeah,
literally been architected that way.
yeah.
And
I mean,
so
look at steam, right? All factories were built by rivers, right? Because
yeah,
of
right. Like,
steam.
to read and write, you didn't have to read and write on a farm.
Mm.
Like all of that stuff is being built around that sort of perspective. And I think, we are the only difference is that it happened at a lot slower pace. We were able to adapt, we were able to build those things, and we were able to sort of, do it over time and build things in and build learning and that sort of thing. It's happening at such a pace right now, and it's only going to keep going. It's literally going at an exponential pace now because AI it isn't constrained like we are by energy, by time, by it can multiply itself. Yeah.
So, how then do we think about this from maybe where we wanted to come together around scaling teams and building confidence across organizational culture, so maybe AI literacy. So well, I don't know where to start here, but maybe we could start at maybe leadership. How do leadership start here? Where do they start? Maybe if we can focus on design leadership, I suppose, but I feel like we could probably talk more broadly around any sort of organizational leadership here, Riley.
Yeah, so I think there's probably well, I think there's a lot of crossover between just general AI literacy, like just understanding what that takes and what that really means, and
Mm.
how to achieve it.
Mm.
Because leaders are human, so they have to
Yeah.
go through the same change processes, just that they also need to work out how to lead through that process as well and be the
Mm.
people that can help others through it.
Mm.
And that's challenging when things are, we're literally building the road while we're driving on it at speed. So, yeah, it definitely is a tricky moment right now. So I think that there's one big lesson that's been proven out now, probably over the last 12 months, is definitely starting to get global data, big, consulting firm, research and all that sort of stuff, has been that, almost the vast majority of organizations are currently struggling a great deal with AI at the moment. Most of them, like depends on which research you look at, but at least 75%, if not more. Some research is up to 95%. I think MIT's research recently was that,
Mm,
but it is not getting the ROI. And I think it surprises me that it happened again. Well, it doesn't, but that there's been this absolute gung ho kind of let's throw AI at something, let's build it
mm,
in. We don't really know what yet. We haven't really defined it, and we haven't really built the actual AI literacy of the people making those decisions.
mm,
And so I think that as leaders, building really solid understanding and everyday use of AI will absolutely make you better at making those decisions. There's a lot of money being thrown at, putting AI into specific use cases, but who defined that roadmap? How AI literate were they, and how AI literate were they at the intersection of business?
mm,
Because they might be AI literate in terms of technologists, but
mm,
are they actually those people who are really at that intersection of business value, customer value, and technology? And
mm,
if not, then they're really only making part of the decision, and they're not really sort of seeing the whole thing. And it surprises me that we've gone a lot of the majority of money that was spent definitely last year and even the beginning of this year was all tech.
mm. Yeah.
Almost no companies were investing really in any heavy way into humans.
Mm,
And it's now been proven out, with a lot of global research that's been coming out in the last, particularly 6 months, has been, the actual problem is like 70% is around people, change, and integration within current processes or adapting processes. But a lot of it's around the people and the adaptation of them, and within that, because it's not just AI working on their own, really, it's AI working within an organization, within an entity, and with people. And if you don't uplift the people, no technology is a silver bullet. Never has been, probably never will be. It might be, I might be proven wrong, but right now, maybe it's not mature enough, and we certainly aren't mature enough to actually do that, where we can just plug in something and it's, Bob's your uncle, you're right to go. So investing in the people, the good news is that genuinely after, like obviously I've been doing this for 2 years now, but like over the last 6 months in particular, I have absolutely seen like a very big, like this definitely has a long way to go, but like a step change in leaders and in budgets and all that sort of stuff, actually now shifting focus to actually look at building AI literacy of their people. And actually building that, because they're actually saying that without it, there's no there's no sort of spending the money. You're kind of wasting a lot of the money on areas that actually aren't going to give you the value if you're not investing in it. And I think it was BCG's research that said the 70% when was human problem, and most of the investments in the algorithm and the technology. But when they looked at who was successful, it was those, like, what was the ingredients of the companies that were actually getting ROI and getting success. And it was they were doing at least 2 times less the amount of experiments with AI,
mm,
but they were actually building it in a deep way. So they were looking at not just the technology, but the people, like uplift and the process redesign, and they were doing it in deep, but small numbers, right? And they were building that in a deep way, and they're the people who are actually getting the value and the ROI, because they were investing in the right way as opposed to just in one sort of layer and not really looking at the actual organizational stuff and things like that. To me, that makes sense, right? Because it's sort of that service design intent. From, if you want the customer experience to be different, you have to actually look at the actual complete under the surface sort of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. Curious, Riley, because I want to go back and read that paper. Is that like a
Mm.
BCG paper or an MIT paper?
Oh, there's been quite a few come out in the last in the last couple of months. I can send it to you afterwards,
I would
for
love
sure,
to,
and you can even put it in the show notes if
would
you want to, or
love to
whatever.
dive in because I think Justin and I have had multiple conversations. I'm doing this agentic AI course on the side, and I'm like, oh my god, they're going to need so many service
Oh
designers,
yeah, yeah.
people who can think via a service design lens and connect the dots, because you're not just plugging technology in and expecting technology to work. You've got to bring it all together: the people, the tooling, the processes, the connections. Are they human agents? Are they AI agents? The fallbacks, the
Mm.
failures? fascinating. And I don't think companies realize just yet that they need that thinking when
Yeah,
they're
but I've
doing.
seen. I'm surprised since I come back to Australia, like earlier this year. I was actually surprised how many service designers were in. I was actually seeing quite a few now, more than definitely more than there was, and definitely more jobs and all that sort of thing. Because exactly that thing, right, is that intersection of human technology, like both, tactical kind of
I,
ability to hone in, but also the wide lens and understanding the systems and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it really is that unlock to be able to do that, to bring those elements together, particularly those who actually have a decent like grasp of technology.
yeah, I do think like the service design roles that I've seen, they're more in like traditional service design. I haven't actually seen them in the technology space, in AI teams, or collaborating with teams, technology teams, to actually think holistically about experiences. Yeah, I could be wrong, but that's where, I mean, I'm willing to bet all my money that that's where designers are actually needed and
Yeah, for
design thinking
sure.
is
I
needed.
think those designers, yeah, that invest in their own, again, AI literacy and understanding, like you said, that, learning how to not only, build and use AI on an everyday sort of point to point, perspective, but how to build AI agents and how to do that in a way that is robust, safe, and executes, good quality sort of stuff, and how to get there, even if you don't build it yourself, but how to work with someone who can actually build it and build that into the mechanics. Then yeah, I think that that's a real unlock. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because organizations are thinking about uplifting their CX, and then you have a support agent that comes in to uplift a CX. But then um, if they work independently in a
Mm.
silo and they're not really connecting with the entire ecosystem of that organization, things can fall down pretty quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that the other thing about unleashing agents, which honestly terrifies me, in yeah, it does, is that if you're unlocking autonomous agents, you better have very good governance and very good understanding about boundaries, etc. Because if organizations are already struggling
Yeah.
to get value and to get uplift and get understanding of how to actually get value out of the current point to point solutioning, actually understanding how and making sure that they're actually deploying something that runs autonomously without human intervention and constant back and forwards. Honestly, it terrifies me.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I'm doing
what
it myself, but
yeah,
it's one of those things. Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, when you have that thinking coming in at the start, like from a service design lens, to say what are the boundaries, what's the governance, what are the risks, what's the traceability, what happens when there are things fail, what are the fallbacks? Those conversations need to happen at the start, not at
Yeah,
the
for
end.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
those are like when I in the program that I teach, one of the things that I look at is like where does ethics come in? Like where are those critical questions when you're actually wanting to build something that's trustworthy and a good AI solution that's ethical, etc. Rather than getting people to just teach them an ethical principle and let them roam free, to try and help them understand how to actually do and apply that, we actually use like the triple diamond and walk through every phase and sort of say, okay, what are the decisions that you have to make here? What are the questions you should be asking? And I think the same as with agents is probably a very good way to go as well. It's like, okay, like what would be, how would we actually get a great outcome?
yeah,
And where do the decisions need to be made? And then sort of have that almost like as a bit of a blueprint to kind of at least ask the right questions. Because obviously, once you've built it and testing it, if you'd made a decision right at the beginning, you probably would have, you could have saved value, your time, you could have saved testing and retraining, like all that sort of stuff. So, the best way to get that value is firstly not having to retroactively do that, because we all know that's never gonna, it's putting a band-aid on it, on something. Whereas if you kind of design it with that understanding at the beginning, then, you've got at least a decent half chance of, getting a great outcome and that sort of thing with it. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And another point that brings up for me as well. We seem to be engineering led at the moment and tech led. And there are so many other lanes that need to come into this conversation. Um, Curious to understand, though, when you work with organizations or when you think about the space in terms of AI literacy and an AI confident culture, what would you actually say are the foundational building blocks of AI literacy in an organization?
Um, I actually think that, okay, so yeah, my position is that you really, I think um, uh, most AI literacy programs and most AI courses are actually solving the wrong problem. And we all know as designers, right, that
Yeah.
that if you're got a great solution for the wrong problem, well, it's still pretty average solution, right? Like it doesn't really solve the problem. So
Okay,
I think
let me
that
just
most
top you there, Ali. I think that's a very, very spicy take.
well, it's driven me to build a business that I wasn't actually intending on being a business owner. So, accidental founder I am. And this is how I got here. This is exactly the thinking that got me here, right? So, yeah,
Most AI literacy companies and courses are solving the wrong problem.
they are. Yeah.
Okay, let's dive in.
They're trying to come from the technology side and pushing it to the humans, right? But several problems are wrong with that. One, the technology is moving so freaking quickly that if you do that, you're having to upgrade your learning 1,000 times over in a year, right? Secondly, it doesn't actually cross over. If you only focus on, say, teaching you, large language models, does that help you with something else? And if you don't, does it help you with, Figma? Does it help you with, does it actually help you apply the same sort of approach in different places and think differently? The third one is that pushing from a technology out lens does not actually solve the core problem that needs solving here. The core problem that needs solving is actually helping people, helping people think differently about getting their work done, right? And so it's you definitely need to build AI literacy on different layers. And like I very quickly worked out on my own use, right? Like you can't do exactly that. Like try to build from like one thing and say, okay, this is this is how you use OpenAI, because even in OpenAI, 6 months later, the interface has changed and there's different features, right? Like so, and so I focus firstly on enduring skills. So literally, how do you actually architect? Like how do you actually understand new mental models about using the technology that absolutely does not operate the same way? So it literally does not operate the same way every other piece of technology we've been used to, which is that it's predictable, like even design, right? Like predictable, learnable, able to recognize and not think, no, don't make me think, right? All of that technology, all of those foundational principles of design that we've been leveraging across all different kind of contexts. Generative AI literally breaks every single one of them, right? And so even if you learn something, like so focusing on the enduring skills, like how to ask good questions, how to actually think through a problem and be able to articulate that, how to actually architect a two-way conversation towards a goal. So you're literally collaborating with a different, so what are different actual collaboration modes? Like I've got like 4 that I teach at the moment. There's probably more. Actually, agentic's probably another one that I could add to it, definitely making it 5. But like, how do you actually adapt the way that you think? Because those enduring skills will only go so far if you don't have the right mental model. And so the way I kind of look at it is the human change problem. So I kind of went, okay, if I'm standing back and I went, okay, really the core problem is that we need to onboard people to working in an AI enhanced workplace. What would that take? What would that take to actually allow them to actually reorientate to an entirely new way of operating that had AI at the center or at the core of a lot of what they did? It actually allowed that it actually had AI as a colleague of some description. So not human colleague, maybe not at the same level, maybe not the same trust level, etc. But absolutely, as another entity, which leaders also now have to grapple with, like you're probably going to have to be leading AI and humans in your team. Like it literally is breaking so many conventions that you have to actually enable people to think differently to actually apply those skills that they learn, right? And so, one, I start with mental models because it's almost like Maslow's hierarchy, right? Like, so mental models are the base because even if you learn new skills and you don't have a new way of thinking about something, you're applying those skills in a like maybe a 20%, 30% way, right? You're not really applying them in 100%, value way. So mental models first, then the skills for sure. You absolutely need to, understand how to actually ask good questions, talk to it, give it good feedback because you should never, I always say, like a minimum of three like feedback session, like rounds in the one conversation, like a minimum, even if it's the most simple thing, right? And how to do that, how to actually validate it's doing a good thing, or how to actually think about it and make sure that it's doing the right thing, how to actually get it to bring in, its collective intelligence. It's stolen every other piece of, digital data that we've actually produced as humans. Like I've got like multiple different things that I use now that is like leveraging the collective intelligence that I can just pull back out, right? And so, I've got Johnny Ives as my mentor in Claude, that I literally go to write something or create something. And if I want to refine it and make it like actually brilliantly simple, even if it's complex, like I get Johnny Ives to give me feedback because there's a lot of stuff about Johnny Ives. So like literally kind of just thinking really differently, because once you get those baseline skills, like it's the thinking differently and approaching something with, that kind of creativity that is the banger, right? And so then the skills, and then that's okay, but that is still hard and takes a long time. And so I actually try to give people things that will actually speed that up, right? Like, so what will actually speed up value? So, like time to value, and also speed up their ability to learn, because it's obviously not like, learning a point and shoot application. Like, it's not like learning Excel or any of those things. Because even if you learn something and you go, that's a great prompt, you use it the next time you do that task and it will give you a damn different answer. And so you can't, it's even harder to learn in general, right? Like it's not just breaking conventions, like it's literally making like 10 times harder, because you have to try the same thing, go, oh, that didn't work. Why didn't it work? And then like have a conversation with it to get to what you want, right? So it's definitely the hardest thing we've ever had to adapt to at a speed we are absolutely not naturally akin to. So on top of this, the mental models and skills to kind of speed it up, there's several things that I kind of try to help people with as well. And that's what are some micro new habits that you can apply, thinking about atomic habit kind of way, like how can you build habits in that help you think differently, that help you think about using AI in different ways, like that actually kind of turn the needle a bit more, because habits, we know, then make it easier, make it less cognitively draining, less, makes it more seed into your natural behavior. So how do you lay out new micro habits that kind of make it easier to both learn AI but apply it to, think? And then on top, once you sort of learn those things and you start to get those little, dial, each of those is a little dial, I think, right? And each of those dials starting to move, right? And ladder onto each other, because they all ladder onto each other to kind of make the rest kind of move, right? We then start to look at how do you actually think about getting work done, right? And you have to decouple what you need getting done with how you've ever thought about or done it before. And it's in that decoupling and understanding how to actually break apart like a task and say, okay, what are the micro elements of this? Which parts can AI actually genuinely be better at than I am? Like, could it, like, like go and do sourcing? Like, so I use Perplexity or, other things to go and do my research, because like it's not, the value is not going and finding the information. The value is finding good information, right? And so if I can get Perplexity to go and do the actual finding about it, I can then get it back, and then it's shortening that time for me to actually get to what I want, which is good quality, information that I can then read through in obviously the summarized version in Perplexity, but then it's got the sources. And so going into deeper things that are really interesting and be able to sort of do that sort of thing. So working out which parts are actually the value that I uniquely have and should have versus, and that's where you don't lose your human oversight. You do not lose, don't give away your creativity, for God's sake, all those sorts of things. So like, where does AI add heaps of value? And also is usually probably the more boring stuff we don't like doing, but we actually have to do to get the value that we want at the other end, right? And so how do you decouple that and actually say, okay, where can I actually find micro elements of where AI is very good and start to bring those in and sort of think, okay, let's now think about how do you actually create a new workflow that takes account of AI does this step, I do this step, what's the handover point? What do I have to check, mentally, like actually, cognizantly to check what it's given me? Should I question it? Should I trace down the sources, all that sort of stuff, and then go, okay, now I need to do my step. Okay, AI is good at the next one. So how do you kind of break those apart, right? And then I think agents is the fifth one. If you haven't got any of these things done well, or even at all, trying and going straight to agents is where it terrifies me, right? Like, because if you haven't actually architected those things, the things that each of those allow you to do is learn and adapt your thinking and build new neural pathways about like what doesn't work, what's actually dangerous, what actually should I be concerned about. Like, that's actually teaching you the mechanics to actually make you good at those things. And without them, that means that you're actually doing it with a great deal of naivety, a great deal of risk aperture that you actually won't necessarily see until it actually is a problem that you then have to kind of, run away from, retract from.
Mm.
That was a lot, sorry.
There was, but I think what you just outlined was foundationally, there's a reset here as well with what you've just outlined. And it was a really good outline of mental models and habits and people fully understanding their jobs again, or what they're entailed to do. Obviously, you can take email and all of the asynchronous Teams and Slack out of it. But foundationally, what is the role I do, and how do we restructure that, and how do I then interact with these new machines? And then I like the way you've just said. And then once you can get that down, you can then look at agentic design. You can then really start to sort of go fast again. But you need to slow down a little here, don't you, Riley, in order to get
that is the number one thing right now is actually we need to slow down. And I say this like with organizations and leaders, like I know it's like completely counter to the current, ecosystem and the current cultures right now. But if you slow down to go fast, like if you spend 3 months and you say, okay, we're going to actually commit to 80% of what we normally commit to in our OKR planning.
Yep.
And we're going to dedicate 20% to uplifting everyone's AI literacy. That slowdown will get you like 120% in the next month. It's crazy, right? And so the actual value of slowing down in order to actually build this new ability that actually gives you more acceleration is so valuable right now. And the other part of it is, as well as in even designing like new workflows and designing new products and services that have AI in it, right? I describe it as having meaningful friction. It feels so, again, breaking one of those core things that we've been built into designers for the last, make it frictionless, right? Yeah. So it's actually been shown very clearly in some of the research that I've got as well, is that people actually trust AI into like exchanges if it's slightly slower than if it was like lightning. Like I even find it myself, I swear, like when I use Mistral, because I use Mistral all the time now. But when I ask it to do a deep research or even, think, extended thinking, and it comes back really like much quicker than all the others. Like it's even quicker than all the others generally anyway. And then, when you sort of ask it to do deep thinking, it still almost outpaces their normal version. And I'm like, I have this thing of going, oh, that didn't feel like you thought enough about it. it's more about your actual user's comfort level, right? And same with like putting AI into large businesses or enterprise or even any business really,
Mm.
is if you want people to actually make a, when they say human in the loop, it's not just that someone presses approve, right? You actually want them to observe, is this, actually question. And so, having friction built in literally to say, okay, approve, okay, what are your reasons? Something as simple as that
Mm.
actually makes the quality of people's, checking of people, like that is meaningful friction that is meaningless. Absolutely, it's annoying, that has no actual value, that has no safety mechanism built in, that has no additional element that it's giving you. Absolutely, get rid of it, bloody 100%. But you have to think about not only what's going to allow for a more, or even just a, I guess, a log of decisions, right? Like, so if you're working with AI and you have to then, stand in front of a courtroom and actually say, look, or, something like that, and you have to justify, decisions that were made, and you're like, well, we did it in the AI, someone checked it. Like, yeah, what did they check?
Mm.
How do you know that they checked?
Yeah.
Do you have a record of it? Like, all of those things are actually building the log of evidence that you will need not only for yourselves internally to do quality checking to see whether or not there's bias in the system, all those sorts of things, but it will absolutely be necessary if you ever have to go to court to justify anything that's gone wrong, right? And so those things are going to be important. So go slow to go fast is 100% the mindset that I really want leaders to actually take on as well, because you will absolutely see the ROI if you invest in that and you actually build in those things that actually allow people to learn and to share what they're learning and to actually build into something that is actually a new capability, and not letting people not making people, oh, just adopt AI. We're going to roll out Copilot. Yeah, you'll be right. It's just writing to it, getting it to do stuff, and wondering why you're not seeing value. Like, you're not seeing value because it's literally doing something entirely different to what they've ever had to do before. And of course, they're not going to be able to do it if you don't actually invest in it. And so, yeah, really, as far as I'm concerned, yeah, I think a lot of programs are doing a disservice to the people, by and wasting money because they're coming at it from a different perspective. They're really not being human centered, and human centered by evidence of BCG and some of those other big groups, is that 70% of the actual holdup is actually related to people's ability to use it, for people's ability to actually integrate it into their daily work. And if you're not investing in that now and you're not doing that, you're never going to see the value, and you're going to be outpaced by exactly what we started the conversation with, which is, AI native organizations that are actually, have far less cost and overhead, that have systems built with the intent of knowing and being prepared and being ready for the AI era, of founders who are actually building that intent within themselves and with any other people that they work with. Like, they are absolutely going to be able to outstrip you, 100%. And so if you don't actually start putting those things in place that actually support that, then yeah, you will be the kind of Kodak sort of, this era.
Riley, I took so many notes. I don't know if you've even considered writing a book, but I've got your book. I've got the synopsis and the summary for you. It's the foundations. I mean, that's your book, Riley, and I think it should come out this year. Yeah. Yeah, I give you 3 months to write that book. Anyways, there's so many points you've raised here that I feel like, wow. We had Gordon on our podcast a few weeks ago, and Gordon also mentioned that importance of slowing down to go fast
Mm,
and taking the time at the start to actually think things through.
mm,
And I don't know if you've seen, but recently an Australian journalist set a legal precedent, however you say it, though, in Australia, where they asked, I think the journalist's name was Cam, they asked the Australian judicial system to get a government employee to hand over like their co-pilot logs to understand their decision making in relation to, and I posted about this on LinkedIn. I can share that one with you. So it's really interesting, all these points you bring up. And I came across this concept of introducing friction, I think a month ago, John Maeda in one of John Maeda's podcasts, and it's been coming up over and over again. And that's like a total paradigm shift. That's like a total shift. Like imagine spending decades building and crafting experiences that are efficient, seamless, go fast, save time. And now we're saying, hey, let's go slow. Let's take some time. Let's be considered. Let's be measured. It's like a total paradigm shift.
Yeah, so I actually think that there's, I think it's yes and actually. I think that there's go fast to go slow is actually something that definitely needs to be considered for sure. But the other thing is that I talk to people about, as I said, like I think one of your first questions was around, what do we need from an organizational perspective? How is that going to, impact from that first quote, right? I talk to people right now, and I don't know if this model is 100% at all, what's going to be workable, but it's just like my sort of, supposition right now is that I actually think we need three different speeds in operations, right? And in order for us to actually be able to operate, because AI, as I said, is going at an exponential pace. Humans are not at all able to actually go at that pace, like naturally. We as much as I am fine swimming in ambiguity, I'm not. A lot of people aren't, right? It triggers our fight and flight modes, right? And the one thing that happens right now is that most people, I don't know anyone who actually doesn't feel this sort of gut kind of twinge when you think of AI. You're not sure what's going to happen. You're not sure how bad it's going to be. You're not sure if it's going to affect you really deeply or not, right? But that is actually shutting down people's creativity. That is shutting down people's willingness to experiment and take risks, right? It's the exact ingredients you need to actually get through this part. And so I think we actually need to think about building organizational systems that actually take that into account. AI is not going to slow down. So how might we build new operational systems that actually give three speeds, right? The top speed is the one, as you said, like that can actually experiment, right? Because it's going at a pace that's changing so rapidly, right? So in order for you to learn what's going to work, you have to continually experiment on operations, not in product or not in not in agile. Like I mean, literally experimenting on doing things differently all the time, which is very deeply unsettling, even for designers, right? And so the other things that actually give you the ability to operate at that consistently without burning out, and you're already hearing a lot of people talk about AI burnout or AI, overwhelm kind of thing, right? Fatigue. That's exactly what's going to be dragging the chain of everyone in about a year's time, if not already, right? And that is that because our systems are not built that way. Our nervous systems are not built that way. And so again, from the human-centered perspective, like what do we need to build to enable humans to adapt and operate in this new environment? And one of them is going to be some degree of stability, right? So what can we build in? So the bottom tier, I think, is called, like I call it kind of like your bedrock, right? What is not going to change? Help us understand what is not going to change in terms of, like your principles. Like, we're not going to change our principles. We're not, like, what are those things that I can come back to mentally or, to actually say, this is who we are. This is what we believe. This is our value. And so whenever I'm coming against the thousands of different micro interactions or micro kind of decisions that you have to make now with AI as your partner and apply ethics over the top, right, is what do I come back to? Right? When I used to work for the Red Cross, we had like these universal principles. And so every decision, if you ever were worried about like, was this a good decision or not, you could kind of go, well, does it align with our ethical, like they were genuine like principles as opposed to some of the posters on the wall, right? And so, what can you give your team that you agree on that won't change for, I would say, years, ideally, at least 12 months, right? So what can they rely on? What are we going to say is how we operate, how we perceive things, what is the value of what we do? How are we going to define that? Because AI is going to disrupt your definition of what you actually produce as value. The second part, though, is the interplay between those first layer, the speed, the like constantly changing, iteration, right? And that is the communication between those things. This is where most of the work gets done, right? Because as I said, humans can't keep operating at that pace, and certainly not while also delivering the same quality to probably the same expected pace, right? And so the interplay in between it should be the most chunkiest one, right? And that is where you both get stuff done in your current paradigm way of doing things, right? But also where the successful experiments that have worked really well, that you actually then document, systemize, and scale within your own team. And so this becomes a new way of working. And this is your way of working. And this is the sort of stitching together of the bedrock of what won't change, this will change. This middle layer will change, but it'll change at a much slower pace that is actually doable, right? That actually will allow you to still get work done and get it done well while still experimenting on things without going out of control and either spending so much time on things that don't actually produce value in the end, because experiments, you have to guarantee are going to fail, right? They're going to fail. You have to learn. It's all about that sort of thing. So you have to sort of be very careful also about how much time you dedicate to that, or which elements you're actually willing to disrupt, at a time, and, which ones are, you sustain in this particular, moment of when you're delivering something. Like you don't want to completely destroy, focus on disrupting the way that your, design systems been built and everything. If you're about to do a rebrand, like, like you don't disrupt, so you can really sort of time those things out. So it's really about helping leaders understand what's the framework for your actual experimentation. How will you know and measure what success looks like, and agree on that before you start, because you're always willing to go, oh yeah, that's pretty good, and not actually assess whether or not it genuinely is in the light of day. And then how do you scale those things and actually help others learn and things like that? And so, yeah, I kind of teach leaders how to actually, think about architecting the new, I guess, rhythms that actually support that actually help to, have a sharing with that, micro layer, like once a month, once a fortnight, whatever your sprint is for that experiment, to sit down and actually like someone who's doing those, experimenting, actually sit down in a whole team thing and kind of do a walkthrough or do a demo or do a, like, this is where we got up to, and, then talk about, is that good enough yet? What questions do we have? Get skeptics to actually pull it apart. All of those things, in one sort of like, and, Friday kind of, almost demo day, but like demo day for like, is this workable? Can we scale this? What questions do we still have? Can we solve those questions? Is it ready to scale? But all of those things are new sort of rituals that you need to build in order to actually have a constantly learning and adapting organization that doesn't burn the hell out of the humans. Because if you do that, it means that everything crashes, right? Anyway, so how do you actually build those things in? So yeah, that's what I'm sort of teaching leaders from that perspective, and how to actually build and architect that strategy to be very human-centered AI adoption and things like that. So yeah, I'm doing that this month, actually, end of the month. I've got a leaders thing for, building your 2026 AI adoption strategy. So yeah.
Lovely. I think we'll put all those links in our show notes, but I just want to, I really, like, I've read the article on LinkedIn but when you just talk through what you just talked through, just makes sense, Riley. Because we move so, like, if you can remember back to the early in our careers where we had digital and we'll have more time, but it feels like things are getting faster and we're making more decisions. We can't keep operating like this, can we, Riley? And I think that's what you're articulating. So how do we set those boundaries, those frameworks, those foundations, those principles to being able to make the right decisions as humans, but still be able to work as fast as possible? Yeah, I really like the way you've really sort of explained and illustrated.
Yeah, I think, as I said, like I said, that you said that controversial, like I think most technology, courses and stuff are doing people a disservice, and they're not really sort of, because we have to understand that this is impacting people on a very personal level, but also it's disrupting. We need a different system to actually allow us to actually learn it as well, like learn and continue to learn and continue to adapt, because even if you do that in your team, even if leaders did exactly what I just said in their team works with other teams who are doing it differently. Their team is having to pass off and hand off and coordinate, particularly in design where you're working in cross-functional teams, right? Like, so you really have to then think about how do you actually have that coordinated layer? Where do you share with the cross-functional teams that you actually work with and think about those handoffs? So it is literally like unraveling a piece of all these different strings that you're just like, oh my lord, oh my lord. That's why the AI native organizations have just got an absolute leg up right now, and if they're really building it that way, they're going to outpace any current state organization unless they really invest in that sort of approach. Yeah, I think.
So there's the trustworthy AI that we're trying to build, and then there's the trust that we need to build with staff and with teams across the organization. So that trust is actually, there's so many parts to it when we think about AI.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah,
I'm hearing. Wow.
yeah. I think that that is a huge thing, because you're literally asking people to partner and collaborate with another form of intelligence. And the reason I sort of focus on trustworthy AI, well, it's kind of making ethics practical for a start. So, like, how do you apply ethics into something practical and tangible, right? But it's also the actual bedrock of humans willing to cooperate. And so that's where a lot of that inertia and then a lot of that resistance is now, is people don't trust it. People, you haven't built the trust. You haven't given people a reason or a system to trust within, or to build that trust and experiment, right? And we will not collaborate. We will resist, and change is hard enough, let alone if you've got active resistance. And so trust is the bedrock of both within product design, but also within organizational design. And so those two things, we're literally, as I said, architecting our relationship with another form of intelligence. And for us to actually want to lean in, then we need to actually think about how we help humans build new ways of actually collaborating with another entity that they can actually start to learn even the signals for trust, right? Like, I know this is very left of center, but like, I used to be in the military. The salute was actually when, I don't know how long ago it was, but like in the Knights era, right? It was that you use your right hand, because most people are right-handed, and so their swords were in their hip on their right side. So my hand is away from my weapon and lifting the shield of your helmet, right? That was a sign of an oncoming person coming down a trail on a horseback as well. You can trust me. I am a friend, right? That is a human signal that we still have built into our military, right? Across the world, that is a signal that, you can trust me. We need those same mechanics. We need to learn them. We need to build them in for us to actually be able to understand AI systems. That's what transparency is, understand how it thinks, and be able to feed back and give those things. And so what are those mechanics that we need in order to actually build that trust? And if we don't have them, of course, we're going to have terrible trust. And Australia's got the 5th lowest trust in AI systems in the world. And so 2 global studies now over the last 2 years have shown that Australia is like the bottom of the heap. We do not trust AI and technology and companies deploying it. So I think RoboDebt did a massive dent in our psyche. Yeah.
I think we're going to have to record a part 2 to this, because there's so many questions about ethics, whose ethics, the ethics of ethics, and there's so much more to dive in. And you've given us so much gold and so much to think about, Riley.
This one, it's been fantastic, Riley. I've learned so much. You've unpacked it, but you've unpacked it in a really step-by-step clear way. And I think, it's been fascinating for me. So thank you for making the time to chat to us today. And we've learned so much. And yeah, we look forward to part 2, and at some point in the near future to see what you're learning, because you're a wealth of golden knowledge to how we need to start and think about we interact and have a relationship with machines.
Yeah, thanks. I've really enjoyed it. I love talking about it, as you can tell. So yeah, just ask me good questions and I'll just keep talking. So that's the problem, right? Yeah. But thank you very much, guys. Have a good weekend.